Hey everybody, we're back. Steve and Carl back for another full season of the Giant Zone. This is episode 47. And again, before we get into anything else, we want to thank you all for your support during our first year. We couldn't do this without you, and we do this for you. And we appreciate all the support and the friends we've made through this. And as always, we kindly ask you to please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel, or tell your friends to subscribe to YouTube channels, people that you know that are Giant fans. And for those of you that like to download and listen to the podcast, if you could please give us a 5-star rating and share that information with your friends as well. We greatly appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. It means so much to us, and it helps us to continue to provide you with good content. So thank you so much for everything. Given that, Steve, good to see you again, brother.
Very good to see you, Carl.
Good.
Been too long. Been too
Yeah.
long, man.
It's good to be back. I don't care what the calendar says. For me, this is the official start of the Giants 2023 season. Already excited to get the ball rolling here. So without further ado, let's go right into it. Giants had a very good day earlier this week. On Tuesday, they signed Daniel Jones. They tagged Saquon. Why don't you start off, Steve? What are your thoughts about the Daniel Jones signing and impacts throughout the organization?
Thanks, Carl. I think there's two ways to attack this. One, it's just what do people think of Daniel Jones? And at the end of the day, I think there's an equal number of fans who are still not sure, or maybe even not a fan of DJ. And then there's an equal number of fans who are like, I don't care. He's my quarterback. I'm always going to look at the glass half full. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what any of us really think. Joe Schoen, in his presser the other day, somebody said to him, and again, I don't remember if it was Art Stapleton or Patty Traina. I'd love to give them credit. So forgive me, whoever it is. But somebody literally said to him, hey, is he your franchise quarterback? And his exact words were, yes. He didn't hesitate. And I don't know, there was a small part of me that was still a little surprised. I thought maybe he's going to dance around that. And that's one of the things we love about him. He's direct, he's honest, he's thoughtful. He said, nope, he's our franchise quarterback. And then the follow-up to that was, do you think you can win a Super Bowl with him? And he said, yes. So, and then I think the last part of that is I think a lot of fans would say, whoa, that's insane. That's crazy. He's not ready to win a Super Bowl. He followed that up. Somebody asked another question, and his response, and I forget the exact question, was, hey, we've seen his floor now. What we're excited about, Shane said, is his ceiling. So what that's telling you is, and we've been saying this all last season, the importance of coaching. So I think there's first off, is he the right guy? It doesn't matter. The coach of the year, Brian Daboll, thinks he's the right guy. Joe Schoen, the general manager, thinks he's the right guy. Clearly, ownership does as well. And then I think there's the tangible. What does the signing actually mean for the team? And I just have a couple of quick thoughts. Look, everybody knows the numbers now. They hear the annual average value and, oh my God, it's a couple $100 million. That's crazy. Look, he doesn't really get that. At least that's not the guaranteed portion. He's $82 million over 2 years, with the potential for $94 million guaranteed if they end up still having him in the roster going into that third season. I love that. I love that because it gives the team flexibility. I love it. It's obviously a win for Daniel, because if he played on the franchise tag at $32 million this year and gambled on himself and then played on another franchise tag, this is actually more money than he would have gotten on 2 franchise tags. But it removes ambiguity for the Giants and for us as fans. We now know he's our quarterback. Doesn't mean they may still not draft one this year, next year, the year after to develop. But right now, he's our guy. And they can focus, they can pivot to other parts of the roster. And they did that within minutes. We saw them tag Saquon. My sense is hopefully they're going to, I think you would agree, hopefully they'll work out something with Saquon. It's in the best, again, similar to Daniel, it's in the best interest of everybody. So it locks him up, removes ambiguity. He's an ascending player. So many teams pay for past performance. It's funny, it's ironic. The very thing people are upset about, well, his past performance, he's an ascending player. You want to pay someone who's only going to get hopefully better and better. It's funny, we're almost conditioned to overpaying for guys. And yet here we have a situation where maybe we're paying what his market value is now going to be if he continues to ascend, and everyone's freaking out about that. So it's kind of ironic, right? The cap hit is only, I think, 19.7 million. It's 19 and change versus 32.4. That's huge. That's a huge difference, because now that allows them not only to go after free agents, but it allows them to re-sign our foundational players, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, Xavier McKinney eventually, et cetera, et cetera. So um, room to tag Saquon, room for signing players. And what's interesting, and don't think a lot of people are talking about this, Shane was also asked in that presser, I think it was Patty Train, and said, "Hey, what do you think about Galladay? When are you gonna cut Kenny Galladay? We all know you're gonna do it." And I think there's a prevailing opinion that, well, if they do it March 15th, it's 6.7 million. Um, Now it gives them the flexibility. Wait until June 1st. It's 13.5. Gosh, that's a no-brainer. It's a lot more money. And Shane's response was fascinating in the presser. When he asked that question, he said, we're going to have some internal meetings or leadership management, whatever he called it. And he said, we're going to talk about that because if you do June 1st, what you're actually doing, and I didn't know this, is you're kicking the can down the road in terms of the dead money to next season.
Yes.
So while you're making more today for today's free agents, you're actually hurting yourself next year. So I forget how he said it. He used a perfect phrase, but in so many words, he said, we may want to take that hit this year, only enjoy the 6.7. But as a fan, for me, for you, for everyone listening and watching, what's great about Daniel Jones, you say, Stephen, what does that have to do with Daniel Jones? That Daniel Jones isn't on the franchise tag, at least now they can truly have that conversation, have that discussion, and do what's best for the team. Think about it. If they had Daniel on the franchise tag, it is what it is. You can't afford to let Kenny Galladay stay on this roster and do the June 1st cut because you would have needed that money to sign free agents, et cetera. So at least it doesn't seem like a big thing. It may not be the top one or two reasons that re-signing Daniel was so important, but it all goes into flexibility, the salary cap, et cetera. My last thought, before I'll hand it back to you, is think of the message it sends to the locker room. You do the right thing. You do what we ask. You perform. You do everything we ask you in terms of being a professional, being a leader, and now we're rewarding you. Think of all the players on our team who have performed like Dexter Lawrence, who we just mentioned, and others. What do you think that sends to their mind and their agents if you let Daniel, you play such hardball that you can't even find a common ground? These guys are going to look at that and say, I don't know if New York really, if much has changed since the last general manager and the one before that. I don't know if this is a place that's going to keep me and sign me. So if you're trying to change the culture, as we like to talk about, you're trying to change the locker room and quite frankly, attract free agents, what better way than show that the kids that are homegrown, we're going to keep them and sign them to a second contract.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And I've said this a couple times over the past year. What I like about we finally have a GM that gets it. He understands the cap, and he knows how to manipulate the cap and manipulate the salaries and the rosters to make it work. He knew what he had to do. He took a team where the cupboard was bare, no cap space, and now we have one of the highest caps in the league. And then with this deal, he's now provided additional flexibility so they can continue to be aggressive if they so desire. I don't necessarily know how aggressive they're going to be in free agency this year, to be honest with you. I tend to believe they're not going to be very crazy. I agree that Galladay's going whenever they decide. We all know he's gone. Okay. But seeing that 82 million was guaranteed after we were all thinking 100 or whatever was going to be guaranteed, was a great move. It was a great structured contract. They also gave him 35 million in incentives, so that's going to keep Daniel Jones. Look, whether he needs it or not, I don't think he does, but it keeps him kind of grounded to say, hey, I gotta perform. And I was reading yesterday he says, look, I'm the franchise quarterback. I take that responsibility seriously now. And he also revealed in his press conference that he's been speaking to Eli. And, if he's talking to Eli, we all know the worker and the professional that Eli was. And if Eli is keeping him in line, let's say, along the same and grooming him the same way, then you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm very happy about it. Daniel Jones is never going to do anything to embarrass himself during the offseason, embarrass the franchise, say the wrong thing. Um, he's a leader in the locker room. He's a captain. I think the players respect him. He's very tight with Saquon. Um, so I think this was a great deal, throughout the organization. And again, I had a conversation this morning with my brother, and he says, "Well, thank God Tish went outside Mara went outside the organization." I still believe it was Tish's influence on Mara that made him look outside the organization for a new
Yeah, I
job,
wouldn't be surprised.
right? Um, but to your point about what this says to the rest of the league, I would not be surprised if a lot of players didn't want to come here, not because of the pressure in New York, not so much the losing. I wonder how much of it was because of Dave Gettleman. I don't know, but it seems like we hear more and more how disliked Gettleman was by a lot of people in the league.
And even Reese before him.
Yeah, agents, GMs, players. So it makes you wonder. People came here, but they overpaid for them. You know, so there is all of that. So, but what I like about this deal, some of the things that this deal says to me, and I agree with you about Saquon. Sorry about that. I agree with you about Saquon. In my heart of hearts, I believe that there was a gentleman's agreement there that, hey, look, we're going to keep talking. We need to tag you because we signed Daniel Jones, and it gives us time to continue to talk with you and to negotiate and get a deal done. I would be shocked if Saquon showed up at camp on the franchise tag that he signed to. I don't see it happening. I don't. Um, what does this deal say? And I'll wrap this up quickly. Sean and Daboll definitely view Daniel Jones as I would say a top 10 quarterback if they're making this much of a commitment to him. So I think that's great. We mentioned the flexibility that this deal provides. Where if they would have tagged Daniel Jones, it's a 35 million cap hit, which would have been horrible. That would have just again crippled them this entire offseason. It gives them flexibility with the, as far as free agency as we discussed. Overall, and again, I'm just going to finish with one of the things Daniel Jones said. I wanted to do this. I want to be here, but I wanted it to be good for both myself and the organization. And they've achieved that. So, in as much as I'm happy with the deal, I like what I'm hearing out of Daniel Jones as well, and out of both Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll as well. So, very good job getting this done. I think it was a very good day for Giants.
And I'll give you one last nugget about the importance of Daniel, and it's about Saquon, and maybe this is a good segue to anything you want to say about Saquon before we move on. Is something that's also I haven't heard anybody talk about. So food for thought for everyone. Saquon, they approached him. We've all heard it. We've heard the numbers towards the end of the season. They said, how about 12.5 million? His agent clicked back. They applied the franchise tag. The cap number, I think, is 10.2 or 10 point, whatever it is for a running back. Saquon said, I don't want to reset the market. We all know Christian McCaffrey, I think, is the highest paid at 16.5, 16 point, whatever. Clearly, he's not going to get that money. He's, no running back. I don't think any team really out there anymore wants to pay a running back that much.
Right.
So two things. One, and how does it relate to Daniel? Unfortunately, Saquon and his agents may want closer to 13, 14, 15. So just because he doesn't want to reset the market doesn't mean he still doesn't want to get paid in the top 3, 4, 5 running backs in football. And by all accounts, he probably deserves it. I don't think Joe Schoen and the rest of them are opposed to re-signing him for more than 12.5. Average, annual. I think the issue is they didn't know what was going to happen to Daniel. So how can you re-sign Saquon 13, 14 million, whatever the signing bonus would be, the cap number, however many years, however all that works out, the gymnastics of the contract. they couldn't even go that far, not knowing if Daniel was going to be
Right.
franchised, because you franchise Daniel and maybe Saquon, you couldn't commit. So I hope, to your point, is that now that Daniel is signed, it's not only, well, yeah, of course, Stephen, now they were able to franchise Saquon. No, 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 not only franchise him, but hopefully when they work out a contract, they can go higher than 12.5 if that's what it takes.
Right. And there's got to be a point where they go back to Saquon and say, "Look, we offered you this, you turned it down. Here's what the tag provides you. What if we go back to that deal? Would you take that?" I don't know. Let me ask you a question. Do you think they are going to try to sign Saquon to a deal similar to Daniel Jones in years? Keep them together.
Uh, Maybe, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's shorter.
Yeah.
So Daniels was 4 years, but they could get it out of it after two.
Mhm.
But it also gives them the flexibility to stay in it if Daniel is, obviously, if everything works out, and easily be a 3 year and maybe extend him again. I don't know that they want to go 4 years with Saquon. We all know what happens with running backs.
Mhm.
He's a year older than Daniel, right? Daniel's 25, Saquon's 26, I believe.
Mhm.
He's had multiple injuries. He's really only had one season where he wasn't injured at all. His rookie year, this season, he was quote unquote injured. He played hurt, but he still didn't miss time. But we all know he was banged up. So running back is just the most valued position now in football for a reason. It's these guys get battered and broken, and the tread comes off the tires, and it's become a cliche now because everybody knows what happens with running backs. So I think I think ideally he's not just a running back. He's not just a premier running back. He's a captain. He's the leader of the locker room. Um, he's part of the culture of this team. He's a locally born guy. He's originally from the New York City area. Uh, he's marketable. He's the most popular jersey. You get him back, and we'll get to this later, but incredibly strong running back class. Let's hopefully Shane and his the front office add a running back in the fourth, fifth, sixth. I mean, somewhere in this draft, add another guy to improve the talent of the running back room. So re-sign Saquon. I don't know that they're going to go 4 years. It might be something more like three, but also help him out where he doesn't have to be the guy for the majority of the carries every game. And I think that would work out well for both sides.
So one last question about Saquon and Daniel Jones. Let's say either they didn't feel that Daniel Jones was the guy, or they couldn't get a deal done. All right. Do you think at that point they would have then signed Saquon to a contract extension or a new deal, and then either tag? Well, I don't know about tagging Jones, but letting him walk. What do you think they would have done in that situation?
Yeah, brother. It's funny. You and I talked about this offline a little bit the
Mhm.
other day. It's funny. I think this is historically the worst year in my lifetime. And you and I have been watching football a long time. I mean, a long time. I cannot remember a year. And obviously, 1980s free agency was different. There was the strike. It was all about a premier running back. You didn't split carries like they do today. I mean, obviously the game has changed over the years, but regardless, I cannot remember a single year where there was this many free agents. And granted, some of the guys like Josh in Oakland, Tony Pollard in Dallas are getting franchised. Regardless, it's still an incredibly strong free agent class for running backs. And more importantly, it's one of the greatest deep running back drafts we've seen in recent memory, maybe more than a decade. Every draft has a couple guys, but I mean, this is an unbelievably strong running back draft. So, to answer your question, to the extent that you're going to be a free agent, I think they may have said to him, "Listen, go out there, see what you can get, and come back to us." That's the only courtesy we ask. Obviously, that doesn't often happen with NFL players. Once you let them walk out the door, you're risking they're just going to go sign somewhere.
Sure.
Um, but I don't know that Saquon everybody that I've heard in the media, cable TV, papers. Somebody would have signed him. Somebody would have. Buffalo desperately needs a running back. So, I don't know, man. Maybe sign him for 40 million for 40, 36, 40 million for 3, 4 years.
Mm.
Spread it out, give him a big fat signing bonus. That maybe there's teams that would have, but I don't think it's as much of a lock as people make it out to be.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. So
He's missed major playing time in his career.
yeah. Yeah. So let's pivot here. So um let's look at the roster on a whole. There's holes on the roster at various positions. Yeah, we're a playoff team and we're in a rebuild and we're on our way back, but we still have a lot of holes. Okay. Um, so why don't we do this? Let's go back and forth. Let's identify a position that we consider to be a hole or a weakness or that needs an upgrade, call it whatever you want, area of improvement. How's that? And then let's kind of dive into, hey, what the situation is with the current roster at those positions. Because I think we're not to the point yet where we're looking at who they should go after. That's all speculation right now. And the
Yeah.
draft, we're not there yet. I mean, there's a lot of that going around too, but just what it's currently like on the Giants roster and go from there.
I love it.
So I think one position we can start with that we both agree is an area of need and upgrade is the wide receiver position. What are your thoughts there?
By all accounts, look, it's one of the, speaking of free agency, it's one of the, well, first of all, the roster, my understanding, only has 3 wide receivers under contract. Isaiah Hodgins, everybody's excited. They re-signed him. Great find. Wandale, obviously, ended the year hurt. He's under contract. Um, and then Colin Johnson, who was unbelievable in camp. We thought for sure not only was going to make the team, but he was going to be in a starting role. He was the one tall, productive receiver in training. I mean, the kid was phenomenal, and then he got hurt. He blew out. I think he blew out his ACL as well. So those are the 3 wide receivers under contract. Shep is a free agent. I think they only had him for a year. Galladay's obviously, no need to even talk about that. And then Marcus Johnson, he shouldn't even be on an NFL roster. I mean, there was just a bunch of journeymen and and then forget me, James, he's a free agent. So most of our wide receivers are free agents. We only have 3 on the roster as far as I know. So it's not only needs to be upgraded, it needs a significant upgrade, just talent and bodies. I mean, we just don't have enough even for camp. So unfortunately, this is going to be the one area for the Giants this offseason that doesn't get solved quickly. They need a number 1 wide receiver. By all accounts, you're not going to find that in the draft, at least not with a high likelihood of getting one. And free agency, it's one of, if not the worst free agent wide receiver groups that I've seen in recent memory. I mean, it's terrible. So, and I don't know that there's a trade option. DeAndre Hopkins, the guy's 30 years old. He makes a crazy amount of money. I mean, what? Kane's not out there giving up draft capital. That's one of the things we love about him. He values draft capital because he knows how good he is at drafting. So I don't think it's a quick fix. I think that they're going to add maybe someone in free agency body just because you need to. Look what they did with Isaiah Hodgins. They know what they're doing. And whoever they sign is probably going to be productive in the system. But I'd like to see them grab at least 2 players in the draft. And I think they're going to draft on traits. There may be 3 or 4 wide receivers by all accounts that are going to go in the first round. None of them would have even gone in the top 5 last season. That's the drop off between last year and this year. There's no Jamar Chase, right? there's no quick fix. But I think what they showed they're very good at in Buffalo, and even in the time in Miami, is drafting traits. Let's get a guy that he's fallen down to the 3rd, 4th, 5th round because he is fast, he is tall, he's a great route runner, but they all have a fault. There's something wrong with them. Maybe their production or their hands, they need to improve. So, I mean, there's something that didn't make them a 1st or 2nd round pick. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that they add some young talent through the draft. They need to add players. I think we only have 3.
So of some of the free agents that we have, Slayton, what do you think? Stay or go?
I think he's gone. I do.
Richie
I think
James?
he's going to look for more money. And remember, these these guys didn't even want him. They were trying to trade him in the preseason.
Right. Richie James.
So he has one of the highest catch rates of any wide receiver this past season. It's interesting. Um, but he's a possession receiver. Uh, Here's the issue, Carl, with our wide receiver group. Richie James, he was an afterthought when we signed him. He wasn't supposed to start, but because of injuries, he ended up playing. And not only did he play, he ended up being punt returner,
Yeah.
and he was terrible. Remember the Seattle game? We all know what happened in Seattle. So I think here's what I would tell you, and we can apply this all throughout the roster. The number one priority for me, and I think Kane has mentioned it, Dable, and for most fans should be they need to improve team speed. And the wide receiver group is one area where not only do we need to improve the wide receiver core and team speed, but we need to improve our specials. And that's not just coverage, it's also in our return game. And we need punt. We can't go back to having Gary Brightwell as our kick returner and Richie James as our punt returner. So hopefully it's not the reason you draft a kid usually, but hopefully they're also going to draft guys who have tremendous speed and the ability to help our return game because we need to do both.
Right.
And so to your point, to answer your question, that's to me the issue with some of the guys on the roster. Richie James had his moments, and it was like, wow, he was great, and he had one of the highest catch rates in the NFL. And it, he has those little 5 to 7 yarders. I mean, he's not going to take it to the house.
Yeah.
Um, some of these other guys we have, like Darius Slayton, he's not a number one, and some would argue he's not even really a number two. In a good wide receiving core, he's really your number three or number four.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't play specials. I've never seen Darius Slayton
Yeah.
play special teams.
No, I don't think
I
they
think
trust his hands enough to do it anyway.
no.
It sounds like kind of what you're alluding to is that we don't have that guy on the roster that other teams have to plan for, have to watch for. Um, no big play guys, even Hodgkins. And look, he was great last year. He in what did he play? 6 games, 7 games plus the playoffs. He was what a find he was. But as good as he was for us, I don't think teams were planning for him or game planning around him. I just don't think we have that guy. Now, he may be the guy over a full season where I don't want to say Cooper Kupp type numbers, but he's that dependable guy that's always going to get the catch. But we still don't have that big play guy. And I think they need that. We don't have that guy that's going to run downfield, go up and get the ball, possession type, deep threat receiver. We don't have him yet. And I think it's sorely needed. I think you add that, and this entire offense is going to run smoother, I think. So, and then one guy we didn't touch on really was Sterling Shepard. You had told me offline he's not on the roster. Quickly, what do a lot of people, a lot of fans like him. He's a fan favorite. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just time to move on. I know they love him. Fans love him. The team loved him. Dave's talked over and over about how great he was to have him still in the locker room and on the sideline, and especially when we were winning, it was great.
Sure.
But look, another 1 year contract on a guy who's had what 3 seasons now end in a row on injury. I mean, significant injuries. This wasn't like, oh my, I tweaked my knee. No, I mean he major injuries. He's getting up there in age. And most importantly, to my point before, he doesn't play specials. So now you got another guy, another receiver. Look, I think they're going to let him walk. I hope they do. Obviously, the heart says bring him back, but the head says, come on, guys.
Well, I think we've kind of got a younger, better version of him in Robinson if he's healthy, if he comes back healthy. And, again, to the point, I understand Shepard's a fan favorite. I understand the players love him. He's great in the locker room. But he's taking up a roster spot for someone that can contribute more and help this team more. And
Right.
this is a business. This isn't a go with your heart kind of league. So I think given that, I think he's played his last game in the Giants uniform as well.
And even when he's at his best, and granted, I know early in the season there was that one deep route, that one bomb he had.
Yeah.
And I feel like we went 10 games before we saw another play like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, for the most part, he doesn't stretch the field in any way, shape, or form. He's a possession receiver. Um, so what is it? Yeah,
He's more of that slot type receiver,
yeah.
which isn't going to stretch the field. Um,
He's a security blanket.
yeah, pretty much. Safety valve, right? Um, do you have a position you want to focus on next, or do you want me to just keep rattling them off here? Where do you want to go?
I'll say this. I think let's just go through every position group briefly. And the only thing I'll say, I think there's going to be a theme. You've heard me say this to you. Bad news, good news. The bad news is I truly believe there isn't a single position group on this team where we do not need to add talent.
Mhm.
And I joke that's even the quarterback room. Technically, we need a third quarterback, a young player, somebody, because Davis Webb is now gone and the coach. So we
Yeah.
only have two quarterbacks. You have to have a third for practice squad. So the bad news is we need talent in every position group. But the good news is we need talent everywhere. So I think Stone is going to attack that best player available. And I think it lends itself to a worthy discussion by us to go through all the position groups quickly. So
All
yeah.
right, so let's go offensive line. All right. We're set at the tackles with Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. And I expect a bounce back year from Evan Neal. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Year one adjustment. So, right side as opposed to the left side. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's got the talent. It's not like he hasn't played the right side. I think he just had to get comfortable doing it at this level. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's the interior offensive line that concerns me the most. Center, John Feliciano, serviceable last year. I know Daboll and Shane liked him and knew him from their time in Buffalo. Probably part of why he got the contract he did with us. But he's a free agent. And then, left guard, we had the rotation of Gates and Bredesen. And again, Gates is a fan favorite. I understand that. I'm sure he's very popular in the locker room. He's the first one to stick up for his teammates, and I think his teammates love him for that. I do too. But when Bredesen came back, the offense seemed to run a little bit smoother. So what do you do there? And then at right guard, Glowinski. You and I were both so high on that signing. And Glowinski's year was 5 sacks and 37 pressures. So
It was terrible. So disappointing.
do you bring him back as a starter or now? I know where you're going to go with this. We've got some players coming back from injury. I beat you to it this time. Azudu's coming back, right? The other kid they drafted from North Carolina, the center,
No, the guard,
the
Marcus
guard,
McKeithen,
right?
6'7", 335, big boy,
Okay. Um,
big boy.
so what are your thoughts on the offensive line here? A lot of moving parts here.
So I think that there's a lot of potential at the guard spots.
Mhm,
Lewinsky's not going anywhere. He's here for at least one more year
mhm.
uh, before they could cut him or get rid of him. So, look, my philosophy. One of the things that was common of the two Super Bowl teams, Philadelphia and Kansas City, is they each had one of the best, if not the best, center in football. I don't think there's a coincidence. Kelsey and Creed Humphrey. There's no coincidence that those Dallas Cowboy teams that we all hated had Travis Frederick. Um, there's no coincidence when the Giants went to the Super Bowls and had success. Art Oates in the 80s, Brian Williams after that. Sean O'Hara was a Pro Bowler for us. Great find. Rutgers boy. Yeah, Rutgers. So, Gettleman, actually, it was Gettleman that found him, left the scrap heap in Cleveland. So, what's the theme? The theme is, and I heard somebody say this recently, the center position is what can be called a force multiplier. You're only talking about one man and one position, but the effect it has on multiple positions goes beyond just that position that he plays. And somebody say, well, yeah, you could say that about anything, not like center. A center is by name is in the middle of the offensive line. They call the protections and they can assist left or right as needed to help out either of the guards. The only other place a guard can get help is by their tackles, but now you're putting pressure on your tackles to double team stunts, et cetera. So when you get a smart center, but also a center who's tough, who's got a mean streak in him, that allows you to stabilize the offensive line. Like I started off by saying, there's no coincidence that those two teams. So where am I going with this? I want to see them draft a center. This draft has, by all accounts, again, we're not going to get into players, 3, 4, maybe even 5 quality starting centers, at least 3 of them that are almost plug and play. Look, if Kelsey retires in Philadelphia, I don't know if everybody knows this. They have a phenomenal young center that they drafted recently who's just been sitting and waiting. So that's what great teams do. You don't just wait until, oh my God, now what are we going to do? The Giants don't have anybody. We love Gates. I think Gates is better at center. He's a free agent, like you said, Feliciano. So personally, I'd love to see them re-sign Gates, play him at center, draft somebody to play behind him. And now, if you have some stability at that center position, and not just play by Feliciano, but potentially have above average play, if not potentially maybe even Pro Bowl eventually, because hopefully you're drafting somebody who's going to be like a Pro Bowler who's only played center their whole career and knows what the hell they're doing. That allows you to do some more rotation at the guard spot. So if you don't have a potential Pro Bowler guard, it's not the end of the world. Guy can help. He can help with the protections. You got some great tackle on the left side, and hopefully an ascending tackle on the right. I think there's some guards that they may get in the draft. I don't know that he's gonna. I actually disagree. I think he's gonna do some impressive stuff in free agency. I don't think there's a wide receiver, but I will get to the positions that I think he is going to attack in free agency because there are some very strong positions in free agency. I don't know that he's going to attack the interior of the offensive line that much in free agency. They may bring a body in, but where I'm optimistic is the draft. There's some potential guards, a few that people are getting excited about. My focus is on the center position, man, because I think we got some depth there at the guard spot, and it's just a question of creating competition. But I'm worried about the center position, Carl. That's what worries me.
So I get that, and that's the anchor of the entire offensive line.
Yeah.
You named a few where we've seen where you've got the one center that's a good standout center, and the rest of the line just kind of falls in place with him. So I'm in agreement with you that if we can get a center here, I'd be very happy. Again, I'm not going to go into names either. I'm not doing that. I have some suspicions or some targets of my own that I'd like to see them get. But here's my thought. Let me rephrase one of the things I said. When I said I don't think he's going to go crazy in free agency, I don't see him signing the highest paid free agent at any position. What I think he's going to do is to continue to add depth. So we may not get, maybe what I should have said, Steve, is we're not going to see that splashy signing. But you get these guys that are role players. You continue to develop and build depth and you build up the interior and the foundation of this team. So I wouldn't be surprised in that. I probably said it the wrong way. I'm just going to throw a name out at you. Shane Lemieux, come back or gone?
His best chance is to come to camp and fight it out. But if I had to guess, I would think, again, in the spirit of upgrading talent, they'll bring in some bodies and we'll find out very quickly. And he may be a camp cut. If he's lucky enough to come back, because I don't know if he's under contract, actually. I guess he is under contract. Yeah, he must be because they drafted him and it was 4 years, right? So,
yeah. But these guys didn't draft him.
So my assumption would be he's under contract. He'll come back to camp if he's healthy enough. Because again, we all know he got injured. And I think they're just going to let all these different guards battle it out.
And then what about the bane of my existence, Matt Peart?
I think they're grooming him as a swing tackle. And you know what? If this coaching staff can get him to be a functional swing tackle, that's a win, man. Because swing tackle is one of the hardest things to find. You tend to overpay a middle of the road or an older free agent to be your backup tackle. And by middle of the season, you usually need your swing tackle to play one of the two spots. It's obviously a horror show when it happens. You're always worried, but it's an important position, the swing tackle. It's very underrated. So you know what? If the kid ends up being a functional swing tackle and maybe even an extra lineman in a jumbo set, he's got size, he's got athleticism. He just never put it all together from the neck up, as far as we know.
I I would have no problem with him being released. He
Yeah.
just grinds my shorts. I'm sorry. So that's all I had on the offense. Did you want to touch on any other positions on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, the only other thing, and I remember we joked about this the other day, is tight end.
Hmm.
So one of the three strongest positions in the draft, by all accounts, aside from running back I mentioned, cornerback we'll get to, is tight end. Um, like really, really strong, like 6 or 7 starters deep strong at least. And different shapes and sizes, the
Hmm.
X or Y, the traditional tight end, the Evan Ingram type, who, Giants fans aren't exactly, nobody's in a rush to get that type of tight end back. We all love Bellinger. No bigger fan of Bellinger than you and I. I mean, we love him. Um, but he got hurt. It was a freak situation. I don't think this is about replacing Bellinger in any way, shape, or form. To the contrary, if remember what I said, if there's no true number one wide receiver to be drafted in anywhere close to where the Giants are picking, and hopefully they find some diamonds in the rough, don't get me wrong, then how do you help the offense? I'm not saying I want us to be New England, but remember, Dave's was in New England for a lot of years. If you can find a second tight end, young, super talented, great blocker, good route runner, or a great route runner and a sufficient blocker with the potential, now you can do a 12 personnel. You can run 2 tight end sets, and the defense can't look at when they do their read and say, that guy's just going to stay and block. He's not a threat. So I'm not saying ideally this is where we want our offense to go. We need more speed. I stick to what I said. We need playmakers and wide receivers. But I think there's a lot of talk about it after seeing the Super Bowl with Kelsey and what he did. Good luck finding another Kelsey. But there's a lot of a lot of tight ends in this league now who are amazing route runners and pass catchers more than ever. And I think it's a quarterback's best friend. So I think Shane is going to add more talent to the tight end room. I don't know that. I'm not saying we should use our first or second pick on it, but most of the other tight ends we have on our team, probably not even like, we all like Myrick. He had 2 great touchdowns in his career. We got the kid from the Jets who's probably more of a wide receiver. Uh, we got him off the practice squad. He ended up making some big plays for us. He's probably more of just a big wide receiver than a tight end. He can't block. We have some bodies, but we don't have any legitimate players other than Bellinger. So I could see us drafting a tight end somewhere in the draft. I'm not
All right.
saying where, but
So here's what I need you to understand because I this has been confusing me all off season. We were all so high when they drafted Ballinger last year.
yeah,
And we were all so, excuse me, my dog is playing with his toy behind me. So in addition to that, that wasn't me. Um, was that, you know, when the year started, everybody, oh, Daniel Bellinger, we got our tight end. And now I'm seeing people saying, well, the Giants should draft that tight end first. And this tight end, and this guy's a freak, and he's big and he's athletic.
no.
So number one, I don't I don't understand where all of the support for Daniel Bellinger has gone. And I don't understand the thought of using a premium pick on a tight end, given all the other holes that we have. I'm not understanding of that. But let me come at you this way. Where do
And
you
I don't want us to use a premium pick. That's why I said I don't want to see a first round pick or a second, or
right,
probably I don't even think we should use a third round pick. But later on, there's still going to be some really good players.
right. But let me ask you this. Where do you see the ceiling for Daniel Bellinger? Look, he's not going to be a Kelsey. He's not going to be a Gronk. Those players are far and few between.
He's not even a Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, in my opinion, may be actually the best all around tight end in all of football. You remember when we played Baltimore, he was unguardable.
Mhm.
Um, and he's a hell of a lot better of a blocker than Kelsey. I mean, he doesn't get enough credit. I mean, there's a lot of great tight ends in this league.
So is he going to be a Kevin Boss? Do you think he's going to be better than a Kevin Boss? Is he a Darren Waller? Just where do you see him?
I think me personally, I'm no expert on tight ends, but it's probably one of my two or three favorite positions on
Right.
the field.
Right.
Um, I think Kevin Boss is the floor. And if I remember correctly, Kevin Boss was a fifth round pick,
Yes.
6'7" out of Oregon, and should have had an even longer career. They shouldn't have let him go. The Reese, he actually gave some interviews last year, or the year before, on a podcast. I forget which one. And he talked about that. He didn't want to leave, and I think he ended up going to the Raiders. I forget,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, he was amazing in the playoffs for us, Super Bowl. I mean, Eli had a string of great tight ends, but I think he was my favorite. 6'7", could block. I think that's the floor for Bellinger. I think Bellinger can be at least that good, but he's not a gifted route runner. He's not an amazing athlete. Um, he's sneaky good, and especially in the red zone, he's a diamond in the rough. Down the guy is, pardon me, he's gold for us. I
Yeah.
mean, look at what Kafka was able to do with him in the red zone. So much fun to watch.
Right.
So sneaky the way they used him. It was, and the effort when he dives for the end zone. I mean, you don't expect that athleticism from him and that hustle. So I think that's the type of guy he's going to be. He's almost like a baby Bavaro. I know it's sacrilege to bring up Bavaro from back in the day, but just someone that wasn't known for this amazing athleticism, but just the hustle, grit, the effort. I think that's what we're gonna. I mean, look at the eye injury the guy played through
Yeah.
when he came back.
Yeah.
Ugh, really? The guy, he came back and played after that, but
Yeah.
he's he's the type of guy you want on the team.
Mhm.
But the problem with the Giants is we were one of the best red zone offenses in all of football. I think we were number 9 in the league. Remember, we did a study on that at the end of the
Yeah.
season. We were ironically one of the best red zone defenses and one of the best red zone offenses. But we are one of the worst teams between the 20s, Carl. And the problem is, I don't know that Bellinger helps you that much. And that gets back to what we talked about earlier with team speed. So you got to lean into the draft. And if the draft is not giving you a ton of great wide receiver options, what is it giving you? Running backs and tight ends, you know,
So let's go to defense.
please. Yeah.
I'm going to skip the defensive line for the time being because there's two bigger needs. Linebacker. So let's start there. And I'm going to beat you to it this time. We're getting Darian Beavers back, thankfully,
Yes.
which you know how happy that makes me. But our linebackers, Gerard Davis, Landon Collins, Jalen Smith, Tay Crowder, and Mika McFadden, not exactly striking fear into the rest of the league. None of them had a rating of 70 or better for the year. So what are your thoughts there? Would you say, do you think they bring back Collins?
So here's the one position group I've been biting my tongue. I didn't want to say anything when you were talking. This is where I disagree with you. I think we're going to make a big splash. This is an unbelievably strong inside linebacker free agency group. I urge everyone to really take a look at the free agents
Yeah.
out there. And it's the one time that I'll break my promise. Tremaine Edmonds from Buffalo. He's I didn't realize he's made like the Pro Bowl every year he's been in the league. He came in when he was 19. I still can't believe that. I knew it at the time, and I guess after all these years I forgot. Buffalo can't afford to re-sign him. He's one of like the three or four best linebackers in football but nobody talks or everybody tends to forget about him. The kid's like 6'5". He's a freak. He's 24 years old. He's going to command a huge contract. So to Shane and Dable, who they know him so well because they were in Buffalo, and then Bobby Wagner, who's 32, but towards the end of the year in Los Angeles for the Rams, he was amazing. They signed him to a huge contract. He only got 6 million of it. He's pissed. They let him go. He knows he wants more money. He's playing still at a super high level. Want a 32-year-old linebacker who's going to be a Hall of Famer? I don't know, because what are you getting him for? 2 seasons, if you're lucky, probably a year. Do I want Edmonds, who's going to suck up a lot of our salary cap? I don't know, but now we've fixed our linebacker or in our middle linebacker spot for the next 5-6 years. And it's not just those two guys. There's a bunch of other like second tier inside. So to answer your question, I'm worried about Beavers because that injury usually takes 2 years to
Right.
come back to where you were. I think Micah McFadden is a wonderful special teams player and really good depth at the linebacker spot. You need guys like that because when someone gets hurt, and they always do, at least you have someone who's functional who can step in,
Mhm.
knows winks, calls, and schemes. Okay, but we need a captain. We need a guy who's going to come in and be the tackle who's going to play behind those two great defensive tackles we have and can fill the gaps and also cover. So uh, there are some players in the draft I've heard a lot of talk about. There's no uh, there's just a lot of really good players. Levante David from Tampa. There's just a lot of really good players. Some of them are a little long in the tooth, some aren't. But I think Shane is going to attack this. I think my final thought is, I don't care what anyone says. We had by far the worst linebacking core, inside linebacking core in all of football. And I don't know how anybody can argue against that. I'm sure the stats back it up, but if they don't, I really don't care. My eyes told me it was the worst. You gotta they got to improve it. And I think they're going to attack it maybe a little bit in the draft because that helps our special teams. Again, getting back to specials. And you need, to keep younger guys who can ascend and be developed.
Mhm.
But man, Carl, I think I think there's a second position they're going to attack in free agency. But the number one, I think, is going to be inside linebacker. I
So
really
let me
do.
ask you a question. Since we've opened this up to a couple names, and I saw Tremaine Edmonds too. Okay, I did. I saw that.
Dude,
I made the connection.
what would you say if they signed him, Carl? Come on,
All
man.
right, hold, just slow your roll for a minute. I
Come
get it.
on.
I get it.
Can
But
you imagine?
wait a second. Wait a second. Hasn't he? This is a bad word, and I'm sure I'm going to catch heat. Hasn't he underperformed or underwhelmed based on what the expectations were of him when he came out of college? I thought he's for some reason I thought he underperformed a little bit. Look, I tried drafting him in fantasy football a couple times, and he didn't do anything great. And not for nothing, Buffalo's also got Matt Milano, who I love. Um, but there's a name out there that I kind of just very quietly keeping my eyes on, and who is the linebacker from Tennessee? Is it Long? The
I
free
know
agent?
who you're talking about. Right now, I'm focusing on Edmonds because I want to answer your question, but I know who you're talking about. There's
He's a
another.
really good player.
I'm telling you, there's a bunch of them.
Also, the guy from Indianapolis, Bobby Okieri,
Yep.
another good solid player. But let's not get crazy here. Let's kind of stick with Tremaine Edmonds because you did bring him up, and yeah, that was a question mark I had too, but I didn't know. For some reason, Steve, there's something telling me he's kind of underperformed or underwhelmed.
Uh, I should have been more prepared, and I didn't prepare because you and I agreed we weren't going to talk about specific players
Right?
yet. So
I
it's
know.
it's my fault. It's my fault. Um, I'm trying to look here. Uh,
So where is it? So I've got a list of free agents here. Okay, Tremaine Edmonds. Let's see what it shows me on him.
he's made 2 Pro Bowls.
102 tackles last year combined. Okay,
Yep.
one sack, one INT.
He's 6'5", 250, and he's a monster in coverage. So he's one of those rare linebackers that's also excellent in coverage. He's all over the field. Great in pursuit.
102
Anyway,
tackles last year, 108 in 21, 119 in 2020. All right, so there seems to be a little consistency. Over
he's
100
20,
tackles.
he's 24 years old.
Yes. Yes.
You
Um,
know,
not a whole lot of sacks, but maybe that's because of the defense they run.
We
Uh,
don't need that. We don't need that. We need a
right,
guy who's going to finally do what Blake was doing. Just stop
right.
the run, cover the tight ends. I mean, we're like our defense is a sieve there in the middle of the field. Anyway, so that's the answer to your question. I think this is the one position. It's not the only position. I think there's quite a few, but it's the one that now that they have all that salary cap room, now that they're going to renegotiate probably Leonard Williams because you can't let him play at 30 some million or whatever he's playing at. They're going to extend him and they want him and he wants to be here. He even said, I'll take a pay cut, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So they're going to rework Leonard. We're going to cut Galladay either sooner or later. We talked about that already. There's salary cap room. So go get it, baby. We're not going to go get a wide receiver one. They're not going to, I think that's the potential splash. And maybe they won't, but that's what I'd love to see.
All right, so
I don't want a band-aid. I want
you
a
want to
dude.
fix. Right.
I want a dude. I want a dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, another Antonio Pierce. Right. All right, so let's jump to cornerback, secondary cornerback. All right, so we're gonna get Aaron Robinson back from injury. I'm not as high on Aaron Robinson as others are. I'm just not. Some other names that we currently have: Darnay Holmes, Adoree Jackson. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. He's staying. Nick McLeod, Rodarius Williams, Cordell Flott, Fabian Moreau. What are your thoughts about the position?
Look, cornerback is probably the strongest position group in the draft. And that's the one position that even if they don't get one in the first round, I think unfortunately a lot of them are going to go in the first round. So they may not have one that falls to them. But this is another draft like last year where let's see. I mean, we didn't expect Kadavion to drop to us. Like we don't expect certain players to drop, and then what happens? They drop to us. So you can get a cornerback one in round one of the draft, and they might even be able to get a cornerback one or cornerback two in round two of the draft. So I think they're going to add. This is the draft to add a corner. It's one of the most expensive positions on the field, and I think Shane really thinks about that. That's what I love about him. He's his intellect. He really thinks about roster construction, and he talked about the fact that he really considers positional value, unlike the last general manager who overdrafted players at certain spots. Um, because he knows when they miss and they have to fill it with free agency, you're going to have to spend 25 million on a corner, and he may not even be your number one. So I think they're going to add to the corner room. I love Flock coming out. I thought he was too skinny, too light in the pants, but he was on a national championship team. And what's great about him is he's got tremendous length. He's got tremendous um, hustle, like for lack of a better word. Like he doesn't shy away from tackling. And he most importantly played every position on the field because when Stingley got hurt in college, he played on the boundary, he played corner one, and he played in the slot. So and he made some great plays there at the end of the season when they finally brought him back and he started playing again. So I think there's a lot of I think they love by all accounts they love Fly. I love him. I guys like that don't fall off trees. And I think with time, cornerback is one of the toughest positions to play in all of football, transitioning from college. Listen, the kid was going to make mistakes. He made mistakes. I always like to say James Bradbury, nobody wanted him to leave. You know what James Bradbury was his rookie year? He wasn't so good. Nobody even knew who he was when Gettleman drafted him in Carolina.
Yeah.
But look what he turned into. That's what often happens with corners. There's not a lot of guys that come in and are Sauce Gardner their rookie year. You have to develop them. So I think Robinson, I still love him. He's gotten hurt 2 years in a row now, but I think that's the guy hopefully that takes over at the slot. And hopefully either it's competition with Darnay or they just cut Darnay because I think we're all kind of tired of Darnay Holmes
Mm.
constantly holding, not being able to cover.
Mm.
Um, so I think we're going to see some turnover in the cornerback room, but I think there's some guys. I don't know if Fabian Moreau and forgive me, Nick. What did you say his name was? I always forget
McLeod,
his name.
Nick McLeod.
Thank you, Nick Loud. I think both those guys were really, really solid corners for us that overperformed our wildest dreams when they picked them up.
Mm.
Uh, but I don't know that they're both going to come back. They could bring them both back on team friendly contracts,
Right.
and that would add depth. But I think you need to upgrade our starting spots in the cornerback room.
And you know what's funny, Steve? I remember back when we did our mid-season show last year, and we each had to pick a player that we thought was an MVP. And I actually said Fabian Moreau because in the first half of the season, he stepped up. He was a big part of the success of the defense early. I feel he faded a little bit towards the end of the season, the second half of the season. Um, Nick McLeod. If I had to have my choice of which one comes back, I would say Moreau over McLeod. Um, I think McLeod is younger though, which may save him. But I agree, this position definitely needs an upgrade. You know my feelings about Flott. I go crazy when I see cornerbacks that don't wrap. They just kind of they go for the collision instead of the wrapping of the tackling, or they just kind of let people go. So I never got over that with him. Yes, he did make some nice plays during the season. I have to give credit. I'm willing to give him another shot. I'm willing to change my opinion about him and be more open-minded about him. But I think you're going to see two, maybe three new bodies here next year, starters possibly.
Yeah.
So that's all I had on defense. Did you want to? Did you want to go into the either edge or interior defensive line right away?
Defensive line, they're gonna make some moves in free agency. You can believe that. We
Yeah.
have one of the things that, in retrospect, I think a lot of people are going back and saying, but Gettleman actually did some good things, and I don't want to get into revisionist history about what he did or didn't do. One of the things that upset me the most, though, was when he traded our number 3 defensive tackle to Cincinnati for a center out of desperation, who ended up being like the worst center in football, and then we cut him. Obviously he's not on the
Mhm.
roster this past season. Um, he was the kid they drafted out of Syracuse. Forgive me.
BJ Hill.
Thank you, BJ Hill. Uh, that depth was such an underrated position on the team, and we saw that. And then we had Nick Williams, and then he went down.
Yes.
And then what did they do? They had a couple of 350-pound guys. Now I like DJ Davidson, last year's rookie, the defensive tackle out of Arizona. I thought he played nice when they finally got him in, but then he got hurt for the rest of the remainder of the year. So I don't. My understanding is it's not a great draft for defensive tackles. There's a lot of one-trick ponies, meaning 3-4 technique, 4-3 technique, guys that are penetrators, but they can't stop the run, guys that are immovable, huge monsters, but they're going to get absolutely no pressure on the quarterback. You're not going to find a great all-around defensive tackle right now in the draft. That's my understanding of everything I heard and read. But there are some good guys out there. I mean, look, Javon Hargraves. Do you know Philadelphia did not use a franchise tag on anyone on their entire team? Unfortunately, that goes back to the fact that, look, he's the best GM in football. And it's like I said earlier about the center position. They have all these young guys. Like, remember what was it, the linebacker last year in the draft out of Clemson who you loved?
Yes.
He didn't even see the field. Remember, he dropped and he kept dropping. We thought he was a first round pick and he kept dropping.
Bobby
He never
Dean.
saw the field. What was his name again?
Bobby Dean.
Thank you.
Yes. Out of Georgia.
And he was out of Georgia. I don't know why I said Clemson. Forgive me. So that's the way you run a team, gang. You run a team by then letting these kids go if they have to go because you can't afford all of them. Then you get comp picks the next year, and then you sign the ones to modest contracts that you can afford. That's why Philadelphia was in the Super Bowl. It wasn't so. I think that's what the Giants are going to do. They're going to attack defensive line. They got to get, you can't have Dexter Lawrence playing the majority of the snaps. Leonard Williams going into what, his 10th season now, I think.
Mhm.
He can't keep playing at the rate he's playing. He's finally started getting hurt for the first time in his career last year, first time he's ever even missed a game. These guys, they can't play the percentage of snaps they've been playing. We need depth. And we saw what happens when they go down. The run game is perhaps the worst run stopping team in all of football when you don't have Dexter and Leonard in there. So they need some bodies and they need some stop gaps until we can get more youth vis-a-vis the draft. So I think with the salary cap room that we have, I think Joe Shane is going to be aggressive. I'm not saying he's going to go sign Javon Hargraves, but I think they're going to sign some quality, one or two quality defensive tackles. I really do.
I'll tell you, there are a lot of free agents from that Philadelphia team that, boy, oh boy.
You could do a whole show on that, Carl.
Oh my God. I was looking at the guard, what's Siamanu, I think his name is.
Yeah, Polo or something like
I
that.
think
Yeah.
he's great. I think he's very underrated. I think he's going to be a great player.
Safety who led the league in interceptions before he got hurt that they
Yes.
traded for. Now he's a
Yes.
free agent.
Yes. The kid from they got him from New Orleans, and I can't remember the name.
Yeah, with the triple name. He's
Yes.
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know why. Gardner Jones, I think. Is that it?
Yeah,
So,
I think you're close. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, we could do an entire show just on free agents, who we like to expect. I just, me personally, I kind of stay away from the speculation. I don't like to be part of it. Um, my
I
thoughts.
don't, I don't I don't want to get too excited about players. I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yeah.
We agree going into the show we weren't going to talk about this guy or that guy. Tremaine Edmonds, I'm sorry, that's my wish. I threw it out there.
Right.
Um, but I think position wise, listen, there's a lot to be excited about, everyone, and be excited about the fact that unlike our last GM, when he signed someone, it's like, oh God, who did he sign now? Uh-oh, did we overpay? Shane's going out there and his staff are finding guys we've never heard of half the time. We're like, huh? Isaiah Hodgins? I
Yeah.
think I might have seen him in the preseason. And like you said, Fabian Moreau, Nick,
Yeah.
if they're going to spend money and they're going to spend it wisely.
In Shane we trust. I stick to that motto. Um, so all right. So we've gone through the roster. We've gone through the Daniel Jones signing. So we're going to introduce a new segment this year. This was Steve's idea. So Steve, I'm going to let you explain it to everybody, and I'm going to let you start it off. So you've got the mic here, Steve.
Yeah, and look, everybody knows how we love to have guests on. So I look forward to future shows where we have a guest, and we'll obviously look forward to our guests doing this as well. It's going to be called "Don't Be Surprised," and during the season, we'll probably apply this concept when it comes to score predictions or game predictions as the season schedule continues. But I think during the off season and the preseason, there's um, a lot of chatter, like you just said, about, for example, free agency and then the draft and then summer camp and all these wonderful times of the year as an NFL fan. And I think often we get ideas and we hear things or we say, wouldn't it be interesting? We all do our homework on certain things. And so I think it would be fun if we have a segment called Don't Be Surprised. And if you want to think of it as a prediction, think of it as a prediction. That's fine too.
So why don't you start us off? What is your don't be surprised for the show?
Carl, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if when the draft comes around in April and everybody's getting excited at pick number 25, if the Giants are hopefully going to have a wide receiver or a corner, we talk about being those two of our biggest needs. And we talked about one being maybe the strongest position in all the draft. And we talked about the other wide receiver maybe being one of the weaker ones, unfortunately for us. If neither position falls to the Giants at 25, don't be surprised if Shane trades down, and he may even trade out of the first. I know you lose the fifth year option. So I'm not saying that blindly, gang. I understand you really want to trade out of the first because then you lose the fifth year option on a rookie contract. We all know how valuable that is, right? We just saw that with Dexter but we need picks. And if he can drop out of the first, I'm not saying he will, but don't be surprised. And he gonna pick up second, a third, etc. Man, we know how good they are at drafting. Don't be surprised.
Very interesting. All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out.
You
Steve,
got Carl.
what's that?
What do you got? Give me
You,
something.
you threw me a curve here. So, um, let me say. So, don't be surprised. That's a tough one, Steve. I wasn't prepared because I didn't think you were going to ask me for one.
Free agency. Don't be surprised if what happens in free agency. Give me something. Give me something because I know you're thinking something. Give the fans something.
Well, don't be surprised if the Giants make a big trade?
Ooh.
Do I have to specify position? I don't want to say player, but I'm going to say do not be surprised if during this offseason the Giants make a very big trade.
You know, it's funny you say that because Mike Garafolo, who used to cover the Giants, now he's on NFL Network. I used to interact with him a little bit on Twitter. I think he's a great guy. And he's still connected to the Giants a little bit. And a few other people said on some podcast during the combine, there are some big trades out there being talked about, but we cannot, those of us who are aware of it cannot say what they are. They're like being sworn to secrecy, you know? Nothing's being leaked, but they are aware of some huge trades. Now they may just be saying that for,
Attention.
clicks and attention, as the saying goes. But there's I didn't hear that last year or the year before, the year before. It's usually you hear about it and the rumors start going around. There's some chatter, so it's interesting. It's interesting that you said that.
We'll see. I didn't want to kind of go the same way you did. When you said trade, I went, uh-oh, but then you related it to the draft and trading out of the first round. I think there's going to be a trade for a player or players. So we'll see.
Is there a position, and you don't have to name a player, but is there a position that you would love and or at least not be opposed if it was a great player, like someone that's worth trading for? Is there a position on the team that you're like, you know what, they trade for a guy at this position, you'd be happy to give up draft capital?
Definitely wide receiver.
Okay.
And then either linebacker or cornerback.
Okay.
I
They
could
have
go.
the salary cap.
I don't want to. I don't.
They have the salary cap, baby.
Yeah, I know. But interesting. Let's see how this works out. But this was it was Steve, it was great to get back to doing this with you. Always fun. I always enjoy this. I always feel better about my day when we do this. So great to be mixing it up with you again. Look forward to doing it again with you soon. Hope you guys all enjoy it. Again, please like, follow us, 5-star ratings, subscribe. Please, you're the reason why we do this, and we want to keep doing it for you. So, and please, for those of you that are watching, you want to join us on the show like we did last year, send us some DMs on Twitter. Let us know. We'll definitely get you on the schedule. We're starting to put the schedule together now. Steve, always fun, brother. Great talking Giants football with you again, and look forward to doing it with you again soon.
You too. Talk to you soon.
Have a good night, brother. Take care.